Today we're going to do something a little bit interesting and convert this 90s 26-inch mountain bike into 650B. So I know some of you are wondering why go through the trouble, why convert it into 650B in the first place. And for me, the biggest reason is tires. I have a ton of great 650B tires, not so much in terms of 26-inch. These are kind of really old rubber, not very supple, not very light. Another big reason is the rear wheel on this bike. It's a free wheel of some sort, and I just have not been able to get the cassette off. And that's really limiting me in terms of drivetrain options. I want to run a little bit more of a modern drivetrain on this bike, and I just can't do it with that 26-inch wheel. And the third reason is, I took this bike out on our gravel loop, and it just felt a little pokey and slow. The smaller wheel and tire size just didn't have, great road feel, didn't have good rollover. So I want to see how this would ride with 650Bs. If you're converting from 26 to 650B, there are a handful of options. You could weld on some disc brake tabs, which I may actually do in a couple of weeks with the help of a local here in town. There are these weird shims that you can put in place of the brake pad, which adds a slot of adjustability so you can use pre-existing brakes. If you happen to have a bike with threaded cantilever posts, this one does not have it. But apparently they make these little adapters where it will move the post up by about 20 mil. There are also certain V-brakes that will do it. I know there was the Avid Tri-Line, I believe that's the name of it. But I don't have any of those things, so today we're gonna do it with these guys. These are the Paul Motolites. They function just like a V-brake, but if you look at this, this is where you attach the brake pad. There's actually a ton of adjustability. So in theory, I should be able to move the pads up high enough so that it will brake on a 650B wheel. I'm pretty positive it's gonna work. I've heard that it works. I've just not experienced it myself. For this video, however, I will set it up with the 26-inch wheel set, get a feel of the braking, then swap in the 650B wheel set to see if there's any difference in braking feel. The brake pad holder does have to move up a little bit, so that's gonna do some things to mechanical advantage, I'm assuming. Again, English major. But qualitatively, is it a big deal? Is it noticeable at all? Or is it just going to be fine? That's what I'm mostly interested in. Since these brakes are long pull or designed for V-brake levers, I'm going to have to say goodbye to these really nice IRD levers, unfortunately, and swap them out for some V-brake levers. So installation was pretty straightforward. Take off the old brakes, remove the grips. These are the Soma Gordos, and one nice thing about them is they actually slide off a lot easier than the ESI grips. And then I also had to swap out the levers themselves. So this is a Shimano brake lever, which lets you set it up for both canty and V-brake pull. On those parts go, nothing too crazy. Installing the pawls were pretty straightforward. What's unique about them is you adjust the spring tension afterwards. Another interesting thing is if you look at how long the lever is, I was surprised at how low you set the brake pads for 26-inch. So clearly there was a ton of room for adjustability. The biggest challenge of the whole conversion was the rear brake. The Paramount has some very specific cantilever braze-ons I had to work around. So I had to sort of DIY a fixed cable run using some zip ties and some housing. It was a little suboptimal, but in the end, it actually worked out better than I expected. It's taken a couple hours, but I finally got the Motolites on the bike, and holy smokes, these brakes are stupid strong. Did my really simple skid test to see if I can lock up the rear brake. In my experience, most front brakes are pretty easy to set up. It's got a shorter cable run and it's going to feel snappy. It's going to feel strong. So for me, the real test is all about the rear brake. How does it feel and how does it stop? And without trying very hard, I mean, the wheel locks up almost instantaneously. I'd say probably noticeably stronger than the rear cantilevers I was running, the low profiles, which I thought were pretty dang good. It's ridiculous. And this is despite kind of this hacky fix I had to do for the rear cable. So I had to zip tie the housing to the frame. So there's gonna be some flex, there's gonna be some slip in there, but despite that, the brake just works awesome. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was just the amount of vertical positioning you have with the Motolites. I thought mounting them that the brake pads would be kind of in the middle of the arm, but they're actually pretty low. So it's pretty clear that 650B is not going to be an issue whatsoever. What I am curious about is, you know, they brake awesome now. Is there going to be any loss in braking power that's significant when you use a larger rim? So I'm going to grab my 650B wheel set up some tires, and we'll do the same skid test and we'll see what happens. So I swapped over a wheel set, put a new cassette on it, put on some 650B tires, put it on the bike, and then I adjusted the brake pad position on the Motolites, which was actually surprisingly easy. I mean, it works just how it looks. You just loosen the collar and then slide it up and then reposition it to the rim. I think I had to move it up somewhere between 1 to 2 centimeters on each arm. The tires I have on here are the Ultra Dynamicos. I think they're 49.9 millimeters. What are they? Anyways, they're 650B one. Plenty of clearance in the bike, and also a fair amount of clearance between the bottom of the noodle and the top of the tire. So you could probably go a slightly knobbier tire if you wanted. The big question I had was, how would moving the brake pads up to accommodate a larger wheel affect braking and lever feel, all that stuff? I'm pretty happy to say it seems as if it didn't affect overall braking power all that much. I was still able to lock up the rear wheel super quickly without a whole lot of lever force. I think in terms of sheer power, again, using the rear lockup as a proxy, because that's all I got, there's probably a change, but for the end user, negligible. I think the biggest difference was in the lever feel. It feels as if moving it up took up some of the cable pull. So you've got a much shorter arc in which to engage the brake. When compared to the cantilevers I've tried so far, it definitely has more immediate braking power, but I do think the cantilevers are easier to modulate. These feel a little bit more binary in comparison, but a ton of braking power. I think I would classify this 26 to 650B conversion as a success. It's funny is I put it on the scale and it actually lost half a pound despite going to a larger wheel and tire size. I think that's pretty telling in terms of the quality of 650B wheels and tires we have today. And this actually makes me a lot more excited about the bike. Riding it around with 26-inch, I felt like it was just a little pokey. I could really notice that smaller diameter. I'm usually not super sensitive to rollover, but it was very noticeable in the 26-inch version. But 650Bs by 49 or whatever they are, I know this. I feel comfortable with it. I like it. What this conversion also does, it just opens up, you know, a whole world of tires. You're not stuck with what few quality 26-inch tires are available or having to search on eBay or dig around through a parts bin. I also suspect, moving up to the larger wheel size, that it will also make the front end slightly less twitchy. I mean, that's typically what you get when you move up wheel sizes, increases the trail, increases the general stability of the bike. So if 26-inchers are just a little too twitchy for you, then this might be a viable conversion. Thanks to the guys at Paul for sending this out so I can do this video. You don't have to use the Motolites. There are some older brakes out there if you can track them down that do this, as well as some BMX options. But the Motolites, super nice, a ton of stopping power, and I'm stoked. The biggest challenge of this whole thing, I think it's specific to the Paramount, is the braze-on the rear. I had to use 4 zip ties to kind of hold down some housing so I can route it to the noodle. If you have a bike that's made for V-brakes, then that shouldn't be an issue. But even with this kind of suboptimal setup, the rear still feels pretty good. If you like hacky videos like this, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon or buying a sticker. That's how I pay for all the cables and the housing that we just absolutely chew through when I do these videos. And also the time. I think this video is probably going to be 8 minutes long maybe, but it's taken pretty much all day. With that, keep the supple side down.